I think we're going to see significant problems with food. We're already seeing, we've just got used to them. You've got used to going into your supermarket and quite often, particularly in the fresh sector, they're empty.
Hello, I'm Brendan Donnelly. I'm the director of the Federal Trust, and today I shall be speaking to Liz Webster, who is founder and chair of Save British Farming, a lobbying and activist group that is very worried about the present state of British farming, particularly in the light of Brexit. Liz, thank you very much for joining us. Can we begin with a bit of history? Sometimes when farmers complain, as many of them do, about the way Brexit has worked out, they're met with the answer, either explicitly or implicitly, well, all the farmers voted for Brexit, they can put up with it now. Is that true, or is that, I suppose, a rural myth rather than an urban myth? Did all the farmers vote for Brexit?
No, all the farmers certainly didn't vote for Brexit. And, there's sort of misunderstanding about how farming works. Not all farmers are, little soldiers all exactly the same. We're all different, and everybody is a different age, different gender, and have a different job, a different education, and also different location. So the research has shown that actually the Brexit vote largely was in fact more to do with where you lived than what you did, and we know that from and also the age and perhaps sex. 55% of men voted for Brexit, whereas only 49% of women voted for Brexit. So, but unfortunately, farming and fishing has been hijacked by the Leave campaign, and it's not helpful. And the thing that people should think about is that it's about food. It's not about the individual farmers. Without food, we're all in without food security, we're in a lot of trouble. And we are what we eat. So having good quality, locally produced food is paramount for us all. So even if you really don't like your local farmer, you rely on him, or her, and that's what we have to try and get people to remember, because most people think food just automatically comes from a supermarket somehow.
There were farmers, of course, who did vote for Brexit. What were they expecting from Brexit, do you think? And how realistic were those expectations?
I think they fell into two categories. There were some that thought, and I know I've spoken to one who thought that there would be a shock and farms would go bust and they would have the opportunity to buy distressed assets. So I think there was that thought. And then others naively thought that we would get rid of all imports and just go back to only needing British food and bring prices up. The thing to understand is that farming has been going through a really tough time for some time now because of the growth of supermarkets. We don't set the prices for what we have to buy to grow things. They're the input prices. And then we also don't set what the price is at the end, the commodity price, because the supermarkets and also the global wheat prices and grain prices set those prices. So there's a lot of difficulties for farmers to really get their businesses underway and to make a decent amount of money, unless they get big investment to come in and really intensify, which is what did happen with the chicken sector. As we all know, chicken's been very cheap and there's been plenty of it, and that's because more of it is now reared in sheds.
You mentioned the possibility, or the hoped for possibility, of restricting imports. That was always surely a rather naive view and has turned out to be absolutely a long way from the truth, because one of the supposed benefits of Brexit was going to be these trade deals that we were going to do with Australia and America and all sorts of other countries. Wasn't it inevitable that, particularly in the cases mentioned, that would be on the basis of greater food imports into this country?
Well, it's just a misunderstanding on their part. They thought we'd still have the protective measures that we enjoyed in the EU, but we'd get rid of the EU competition. Of course, the opposite has happened, because we are restricted to export now because there's checks between us and our biggest market. And yet we've got no control over our imports that are coming in via the EU, which means now we've got illegal foods coming in And whilst there are some deterrents for European exporters to send to Britain, there's not much coming back from here. And they have got some paperwork to do. They're not facing anything like we're facing with the SPS checks. So, for instance, the people that we use to send our beef out into the market has not sent any meat at all into Europe since Brexit happened. They didn't even try because it was too difficult. Marks and Spencer's, the same, gave up sending food to Europe after trying for a few months after Brexit happened. So, and some people say, oh, well, it's okay, we can just eat our food ourselves. But it doesn't work like that. A lot of our older animals go over to the continent to be processed for pet food. Most pet food is processed in Europe. We don't eat mutton in Britain. That goes over to Europe. And a lot of offal, the same, goes over to Europe. So the food system that we were in when we were members of Brexit was incredibly efficient. There was really no waste. And now we're in a position of wastage, which means more costs. It's as simple as that. Sometimes
people say Brexit wasn't carried out properly. It's all the fault of the government. It was too hard or too incompetent to Brexit. Do you think that there are better policies that the British government, the Conservative government, could have adopted after Brexit, which have mitigated or perhaps even got rid of the problems for British farming that you've identified?
There was no good Brexit, particularly for farming and manufacturing, and we know that from Patrick Minford, the Leave economist. It really means the only benefit, if you did the extreme benefit, is to import everything and then just go into just completely into services. But that leaves everybody high and dry, as we know. And it also leaves us with no sovereignty, really, because if we're relying on other countries to feed us, as we're seeing now with Israel and Gaza, you're in a very weak position if you're relying on food coming in from other countries, and you can be held to ransom. And we learned all of these lessons in the last war, but they've just been forgotten. Food has just been so efficient in the European Union that people have taken it for granted. My grandfather was a cook in the RAF in the last war, and he was sent out to India, and he witnessed the famine out there. And he impressed upon me the importance of food security. And it's something that I will never, ever forget, and never take food for granted.
Do you think our food security is in jeopardy at the moment over the next 6 months, say?
I think we're going to see significant problems with food. We're already seeing, we've just got used to them. You've got used to going into your supermarket, and quite often, particularly in the fresh sector, they're empty. So you've become used to it. But this winter, I think we will see more food problems. But equally, the food problems that we're experiencing are inflation. We're paying more for food. Inflation has been, up towards 20% for food. And this winter, particularly with the Gaza-Israel situation, we're going to see more inflation, more problems. Goodness knows if anything was to happen with Taiwan and China, then, we really are going to be in a lot of trouble. I think we will always get food, the same as we got the vaccines before we will want it, because we're a wealthy nation. But for whatever food's being diverted here, we'll have to pay more for it. There will be less choice. And it also means then less goes through to the poorer countries where already, starvation is a problem. I mean, more than a problem. People are dying from starvation, millions of people.
Are there things that you think the government could do in the short term to mitigate the position? You mentioned the absence of checks on imports. How could that be remedied? Do we have the administrative capacity to do it?
Well, they keep saying they're going to bring them in, and they've spent a fortune on putting the infrastructure together. The issue is that as soon as they put those checks in, there's more inflation. And so it's like driving down a narrow road and there's nowhere to turn around. We're stuck. And so I said it a year ago, the only answer to this is to get rid of the red tape for us, which means going back into the single market. And once we're back in the single market and customs union, then we're a rule taker, and that's uncomfortable. So then, we need to rejoin the European Union. All roads go back in that direction. if you want to be a secure country with sovereignty and to be able to rule yourselves and not be scared of being held to ransom for commodities. It's that simple. That's why we joined in the beginning.
Certainly one of the reasons. But do you think that the halfway house of joining the single market and the customs union is ever going to be a viable one? Isn't it a choice between rejoining the European Union and remaining outside and trying to make the best of it? Do you think it would ever be politically feasible, either in this country or for our partners in the European Union, to have this halfway house of being in the single market and the customs union, but not members of the full members of the European Union?
I think we could have gone along with this for much longer had Ukraine not happened. And also, if Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak were in front of me now, I'd have a jolly good row with them to say, why on earth didn't you just stay in transition? Because COVID was so enormous, as we all agree. It was an enormous shock. So to then decide to go straight in and put us through another shock by actually continuing with the rupture was so irresponsible, and it's something that the media or commentators don't hold Rishi Sunak to account on, or the opposition, quite frankly, because they should have been screaming about this, But as soon as Russia invaded Ukraine, it was entirely obvious there was going to be problems with food across the board, across the whole world. And so anyone interested in food security is national security. If you can't feed your people, you're looking at, huge problems across society. And anyone who's got an understanding of how to make sure there's social cohesion understands that we need to make sure a country has enough food. And so it was completely and utterly irresponsible of them. But what they should have done at that point, if they wanted Brexit to work, they should have started pumping money into food production, but they haven't done that. So this winter, a lot of our greenhouses are not going to be growing tomatoes and cucumbers. And this is where we'll begin to see the problems. No peppers being grown here. Because they can't afford to run, they can't make money at it.
You criticised the political leadership. Do you think the leadership and prominent people within the farming industry are as aware as they should be of the problems that you're pointing to? And are they making enough of a fuss about it?
Yes, they are talking about it. I don't know, recently Minette Batters was very outspoken about Jacob Rees-Mogg's calls for hormone-fed beef, and she was robust in dismissing it. Certainly the leader of NFU Scotland has been very outspoken about it. But there is an element of appeasement going on all of the time in thinking there's going to be a way of solving this. And nobody's really looking at the harsh reality of it. And politically, I think there isn't possibly, they're in government, we better not upset them and we better not say things they don't want to hear, and we'll try and just keep quiet and keep going. So that's the nightmare of where we are. There's really been no one strong enough with a really clear way of communicating to people what this means to everyone, because we all care about ourselves. And that's why the food situation the food arguments around Brexit are so strong, because it impacts all of us. And it's so important to get it right. But every day that we remain in this situation, every day, it means that food production here continues to collapse. And the ironic thing is that we become more reliant on Europe to feed us. Yeah. But then Europe is not obliged to feed us because we're not connected to them any longer.
Do you think that we'll rejoin the European Union within the next 10 years?
If we don't get this sorted, we'll just continue to go into decline, and conflict and social problems will continue to get worse. So at some point we have to look at reality and say, will we either, and you only have to look at Ukraine. Are they sitting around and dithering, saying, oh, should we join? How long will it take? No, they're not. They're just saying, we want to get in, and that's it. That's all we need to get to. We didn't prevaricate about Brexit, and nobody sort of said, oh, we want to do Brexit, but oh, it might take this year. No one did that. It was just like, we want Brexit, we want it now. I mean, Brexit still isn't jolly well finished, and it never will be finished. And being a member of the European Union will never be finished, because things continue to keep moving. Democracy happens, advances happen. So legislation is needed. Nothing is permanent. But if we're working with our neighbours and friends as members together on a level playing field with rules, which means that everything is as fair as it possibly can be, that is the best for an island nation. You tell me where there is another island nation like Britain, that, on the western front of a large continent, that is thriving by being on its own. It just doesn't exist. And we've got a hard climate here, particularly for growing food. So,
well, thank you very much indeed. Is there any concluding reflection you want to add? We've covered a lot of ground, and it's been very, very eloquent and impressive. Thank you very much. Is there anything else?
That's okay. I would just say that we just need to be positive. We need to be positive, and we need to be assertive, and we need to stop being on the back foot. The fact that we lost the referendum gave this argument for Brexit strength, and we need to get rid of that. Strength is with us, the majority are with us, and we must make demands to get our country back.
Yes, well, it was 7 years ago, of course, that we had the referendum, and I saw somebody writing in an article recently, I forget who, saying that you shouldn't be afraid to reverse a mistake just because you spent a long time making it. And I think that's very relevant to Brexit. In my view, and I think your view, the only answer to Brexit is no more Brexit. Thank you very much indeed. I'm sure we'll ask you to join us again and review the situation in a few months or a year. Thank you very much.
Thank you.